The WPMRR WordPress podcast is brought to you by WP Buffs. WP Buffs manages WordPress websites 24/7 and powers digital growth for agencies, freelancers, and WordPress professionals. Join our white label program, and by next week, you could be offering 24/7 white label website support to your clients and passively growing your monthly recurring revenue. Or become a WP Buffs affiliate to earn 10% monthly payouts every month for the lifetime of every client. And finally, if you're looking to sell your WordPress business or website, check out the WP Buffs acquisition unit. Learn more about all three at WPBuffs.com.
All right, we are live on the pod this week. We've got Leonardo Losoviz on the podcast this week. Leonardo, why don't you tell folks a little bit about what you do with WordPress?
Well, I've been working with WordPress since 2012 now, and I'm a developer. I was building websites, and as I was building websites, I was building my own solutions for the websites, and my own solution grew into some library, which is what I'm working on now, which is based on GraphQL. It came as a natural solution, and now I'm not building websites for clients anymore. I'm full on working on this library. It's a plugin nowadays.
Okay, cool. So it sounds like you went from either like freelancing or client work and moved into more selling your own product or building your own plugin, open source plugin. Is that right?
Actually, I have never managed to get a client. I'm not very good making money. I'm good with building stuff, not with selling stuff. So I was actually building a website for a friend of mine. He has an NGO. I was volunteering for him. And, it was like a hobby. So because it's a hobby, you can take liberties. You can experiment. You can do what you want to do. You see something new and you're like, I'm going to try this out, So, you don't have the responsibility of having to make money in that sense. So I was trying stuff. And actually, I when I started with WordPress at the beginning, I'm talking about 2012, okay? For me, it was glorious. It was like, wow, look at this. Like nowadays, people complain about WordPress because, it's old by now. But when I started, which was not, it was not old, it was not new. For me, it was just amazing. And in that moment, there was no Facebook. Nowadays, every website seems to be a Facebook. Everyone, if it doesn't use React, they're like, oh my God, what are you doing, But I've been going on with WordPress, and I'm still in love with WordPress, and I don't think I will stop being in love with WordPress in that sense. So as I was saying just now, I was playing, and I've been playing with WordPress since 2012, trying out new things and coding new things and experimenting with stuff, and not so much client work. No, I don't have that.
Yeah, cool. Tell me, as someone who's not as technical, you mentioned this project you're working on, so if people want to check out the stuff you're working on, it's just at GraphQL API.com. You mentioned before, plugin, library. As someone who's not very technical, I'm kind of like, what does a library mean? What does, as opposed to a library, like in a plugin or part of a plugin? Maybe we could also start with just like, what is GraphQL and like, how does it fit into the WordPress ecosystem? Like, what would people use it for,
Yeah, okay, perfect. Okay, so WordPress is a software for making websites. But what does it mean to make a website, right? When they ask you, hey, can you make a website for me? Yeah, sure. How much will you charge? Well, I don't know. What website do you want to build, right? So there are websites and websites. You can actually build a bicycle, or you can have the fastest car, or you can have like a studio apartment, or you can have a penthouse, So it is the same with websites at the end of the day. So in this sense, nowadays we have this trend to become more modern, and this trend to use client-side frameworks for rendering the content of your website to make it dynamic. So the prime example of this is Facebook. I think that Facebook has set like a precedent in the sense that it's easy to use and it's free. So then everyone expects that kind of quality. So then the question is, how do we make Facebook-like websites? There are a couple of tools You can call them libraries, or we can just call them tools. At the end of the day, a library is just a tool. One of them is called React, another one is called Vue, and like this, there are a couple of them. So the idea with these tools is that you will build or you will render the website on the client, on the browser, and then you can interact with the website very easily. So for instance, when you're typing and the response, appears on real time, when you're chatting with somebody, there's like a small pop-up, and as you type, you have a response from the other person that it comes at the same time. All of these dynamic websites, right? So they're all rendered on the client side. So if you think about WordPress is very static in that sense, because historically you render the whole website on the server and you need to refresh the whole page, right? So you could not have that interactivity, that as you type something on the screen, there is a response, that the screen actually changes on real time. And so the idea is, but we still want to use WordPress. So how do we make that happen? The idea is to decouple the server side and the client side. So now you have the server, which is still WordPress, to handle all of your data. You still create your posts, you have your users, you add your comments. All of this data, you still have a WordPress backend to manage that. But on the front end, on the client, you use these tools such as React or Vue to produce HTML, to convert that into what the user will see. Okay? But now, how do we communicate? That's where you have GraphQL. Let's not talk about GraphQL yet, because GraphQL is a new tool. There's something called REST, which is what you have in WordPress since version 4.7, which is what is called an API. It's basically a way to get data. So you tell the WordPress server, I need all the blog posts. Please give them to me. And the API, the REST API, will return a list of blog posts in a easy to consume format, which is called JSON. So in the JSON, you will have an array of items of all the blog posts: title, URL, and author. Title, URL, author. Title, URL, and author for all of them. So you get all this data, and in the front end, you can use React or Vue to produce your website, your web page. Okay? So this is what we have had with WordPress since version 4.7, so like three to 4 years ago. So now we have GraphQL. GraphQL is the same concept as REST with a few differences. The few differences is that REST, you get all the data that is predefined on what is called an endpoint. So with REST, you say, I need all the blog posts, and there's a URL that will be /post, and you get that, and you cannot really customize it. So whatever you're given is what you have, and you have to use that. If you need some custom data, you need to create another endpoint. So when you have one endpoint, you can use it. When you have 2 endpoints, you can use it. When you have 10 endpoints, you can use it. But when you have a big project, and you might need 50 endpoints or 100 endpoints, it becomes a management problem to have to use REST. GraphQL works differently. With GraphQL, you have one single endpoint. So with REST, you have /posts, /comments, /users. With GraphQL, you have only one single endpoint, which is /GraphQL. And then you do a query, and you ask for the data that you need, exactly the data that you need. So you say, I need the posts, and for each post, I need fields, ID, title, and content. And then the endpoint will give you exactly that data. So then you don't need to manage the endpoints on the back end. So at the end of the day, REST and GraphQL serve the same purpose, which is to have the server transfer data to the client. The difference is that while REST, the data that you get is predefined, in GraphQL, it's dynamic. You get it on the fly. You can say, I need this data. So then it becomes less bureaucratic.
Cool. Okay. I think I followed that. I've had conversations on this podcast before about headless WordPress, and that was with Scott Bollinger from AppPresser. That was episode 72. Is that people have called this kind of like headless WordPress, decoupled WordPress? Yeah. We're talking about the same thing there. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's called decoupled because you're decoupling the backend and the front end. Now you can have WordPress on the backend, and you can render the content with any other tool. It doesn't have to be WordPress. So now they are decoupled.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay, cool. So this has been an interesting topic for me. I'm on your website right now, just GraphQL-API.com, and I see you have like a cool like interactive area here where I believe it's talking about that single endpoint you're talking about that your tool uses, because I see like you can press this play button and it'll do this. It'll try to grab what it needs from you, but it looks like it's grabbing from a single endpoint, and your tool is just asking for what it wants, right? It's asking for URL, title, excerpt date, comments, limit 3. And based on that single endpoint, you can just pull from that endpoint and ask for what you want, which is, I feel like makes it easier. Again, I'm not super technical, but I like to be able to ask for something and get what I want back, and probably the same for developers. Tell me a little bit about security issues around API or the open API. I know there's been talk of like turning off that API because of security risks in the past. Is that something that's still a concern? How does that kind of work within your framework?
Yeah. All right. One thing before we jump into this issue, you are playing with the client. Yeah. You can press play and it will give you the data, but you can also play with it. You can actually modify the query. So if you start typing, it will list down. Yeah. It will list down all the fields that you have available on what is called the schema. So this is where we have the security problem that you were asking. When you type there, it gives you all the fields, right? But that is available to everyone, not just to you, who is the admin of the website. Because now you have one single endpoint. I am somebody that you don't know, and I can also type a query against your website, and I can see all of your data. So that is potentially a security problem, because, what happens if you have private data? The user's email, should that be public or should that be private? Now, this is not a new topic, because, you have this problem with WP REST API also, that you have the user's email. Should we make that public or should we make that private? But GraphQL, the problem is compounded because all of your data is available on that single endpoint. So what do we do? Okay, I will tell you, this is a problem that comes with GraphQL, right? In general, all of the solutions that you have for WordPress, for Laravel, right, PHP, for JavaScript, for .NET, for all of them, every single GraphQL server will need to cope with this issue. It's a big problem with GraphQL. The way that I have faced this challenge is with something called persistent queries, which is the intersection between GraphQL and REST. So if you actually play if you check the documentation on the site, you can read about that. You cannot play so much about that because persistent queries is an endpoint that you publish on your website like REST. So then what is the idea? The idea is, instead of having the single endpoint that is available to everyone, you only have it on your backend, on your WordPress, on your WP admin. So then you log into the WP admin and you have the same client to compose GraphQL queries. Then you create your query, title and URL and content. And when you have the query that you want, you publish it. And as you publish that, that becomes an endpoint on its own URL, similar with REST. And now you grab that URL from the new endpoint and you access that on your website. So that means that you are, once again, predefining all the data that is exposed, not everything. And you can still access everything, but by default, the default behavior on my solution, on my plugin, is to disable the single endpoint and to have the admin create persistent queries because they're very secure.
Gotcha. Cool. I think that
is that
makes sense.
very technical?
It's somewhat technical, but I think it's a technical topic. So I think that makes sense to me. I'm trying to work it through a little bit in my head, but the persistent the persistence issue you mentioned does seem to make sense. So cool. I remember when I was talking with Scott in our conversation about headless, we talked about like what would some of the reasons you may want to do a decoupled WordPress and have kind of a WordPress backend and a React front end or something like that. And one of the reasons was performance, and it was just the speed, loading time of the website. And I remember he has his podcast. He created his podcast website on a headless website, and it was so fast, like going to different URLs, different pages. It was like almost instantaneously loading, and I was like pretty blown away. But as someone who's kind of a layman from a technical standpoint, if I'm thinking about like I want to create a website that has good SEO, and usually when I create a WordPress website, okay, I'll use like a Yoast, SEO plugin or Rank Math SEO plugin, and that's how I kind of do my SEO. How does that work when it comes to pushing that kind of stuff through to maybe a React front end? Like I want to make sure all my title tags are correct and meta descriptions are correct, and that the SEO data is pushing through so that I can have my WordPress backend React front end site still rank well and have good on-page SEO so that I can drive some traffic. Is that like easy, or is that still a challenge? Like how does that SEO data pull through to a React front end in terms of a decoupled site? Is that a challenge?
It is. It's complexity. So what you're actually saying is what we all want to have, and you need to invest a lot of time and a lot of effort into that. So what you want is a website that on one side is decoupled, so that you can access all the data and render that very quickly on the front end, so that the user can have a very snappy experience. But at the same time, if you load that same URL, it has to come from the server. So then you have exactly the two solutions. You're coding it twice. You're coding it on the server to produce HTML that works well with SEO. And at the same time, you're coding it on the client side so that the user can have a snappy experience. It's tough. It's a challenge. There's no standard solution for that. The best strategy is to use these tools in React. You can do what is called server-side rendering. That you can also render the React components on the server and print your HTML on the server. And so the same components, you can render them on the client or on the server, but it's effort. And there's, the best websites in the world, the nicest ones, they have huge teams basically to take care of these challenges. Yeah. The day that WordPress, now we have Gutenberg, right? And Gutenberg, if you think about it, is React that is being server-side rendered. Because actually, you go to the WP admin, you go to the WordPress editor, and when you create a blog post, you're using React. And the way that it works, Gutenberg, is that it saves the HTML of the blog post, and then is rendered on the server, right? And Gutenberg right now doesn't really work on the client side. It's a lot of effort to make a Gutenberg website that works on the client side. One day they will work on this issue to have Gutenberg be both server-side render and also perfectly working on the client side. And then WordPress will be massive in the sense that you can build these wonderful websites just by, using the WordPress editor. When that happens, it will be extremely awesome. But until then, it's a challenge.
Yeah, I think they started on Gutenberg knowing that was a long-term project and that wouldn't work perfectly the first, year or two. It's going to take years to get it to that point. But I think that pain point we're talking about here is a big one in terms of decoupled WordPress. After I had my conversation with Scott, I was thinking like, his website is so fast. Like we would have such an advantage over some other WordPress websites in terms of like SEO stuff, if we had a website that loaded that fast, like Google would be like, wow, like, okay, like obviously this is a ranking factor now. Your website's so fast, let's rank the site better. But the challenge is our current SEO structure. We'd have to totally translate that into, we don't have a huge team here at WP Buffs. We've got a small team, and so we don't have the resources to be able to pull off a big project like that at this point. But I think if that's a challenge that people could, that a team could solve, how to get. The challenge is WordPress is open source, right? So everyone's always updating their plugins and changing their plugins and themes, and so to be able to move all that stuff seamlessly into a React environment or a different front end environment requires probably constant tinkering and probably a big team to be able to constantly be working on, someone updated their plugin. Okay, we have to update how we're pulling in this information into React, something like that. So there's a lot there, but it's a cool idea. All right. What else do we want to talk about? How hard is it to get new users? You kind of mentioned at the beginning of this call, you were like, I'm not very good at selling or like marketing or kind of that area of the business. You're more of a tinkerer. You're more of a developer. You want to, a product person, you want to work on a cool solution. How has the journey been in terms of, your stuff's live right now, GraphQL-API.com. People want to go check it out. How has the process gone of getting adoption for this tool?
It's a work in progress. And it's tough in a way. These things, they don't come easy. I am envious of all of these plugins with millions of downloads. You don't know how much effort it is. You look at it from outside and you're like, I can do that. But when you're doing that, you're like, okay, wait, what should I do now? I'll tell you what is my strategy, okay? So I've been working on this project, and I think my project is quite cool. So then I was thinking, this is me being very naive, right? I just upload it. I have it on GitHub. People will use it, and then I will get millions of followers. No, it doesn't work. You need even if you have the greatest software ever, you need to promote it. I think that Google is the only software that was not promoted that became, that was amazing. But otherwise, everything you have to promote very heavily. What I'm doing right now is to write blog posts. I'm not going to spend money. I'm not going to advertise because I have an open source plugin. So from that side, I find it clashing with the values. If you're doing something open source, I believe it's kind of weird if I pay for an ad, right? So it has to be organic. And to be organic, I'm just writing blog posts and trying to connect to people. I'm spamming on Twitter. I don't know how to use Twitter. So then I approach people and like, hey, look at what I'm building, and they're like, hey, dude, don't sell anything to me. No, but it's open source. Please check it out. Yeah, okay. And they don't show up. You see what I'm saying? That is actually hard. Every 20 people that you approach, one will download it. So I don't have a team. It's me. So at the end of the day, I'm thinking, okay, should I spend my energies bugging people and doing marketing, or should I work on my product? This is the challenge. If you don't have an investor behind your back to give you money and then employ a team of marketing people and salesmen, and you have to do everything, it takes time. It's slow. It's a process. Now, the good thing is that when somebody does like my product, they are very effusive about it. Like, oh my God, this is so good. And you feel good. And
Awesome.
the funny thing that happens with strangers. So I'm promoting my stuff on Reddit, and I don't know who this person is. It's an avatar. Okay. But when I have an upvote and somebody says, this is so awesome, I just feel so good about it. So I right now I'm living off trying to show my stuff to strangers and having an upvote, and trying to find new channels to talk about my plugin. I'm using Reddit, where they do not like WordPress at all. I may say that they hate WordPress. It's so tough to talk about WordPress on Reddit, and I'm showing up in all the WordPress newsletters lately. I've been submitting my blog post, and they're sharing my content.
Cool.
And waiting, it's waiting and hoping that one day there will be a mega event, like a big shot saying, like Matt saying, "Oh, I use this plugin. Everybody, go check it out." It's waiting for that moment to happen.
Yeah, totally. What does success look like for you in terms of building this? Is it like number of users of the plugin? Because you mentioned that as a big thing. Like if you hit 1 million downloads, like is that good for you? Is there some like, are you trying to like potentially attract like funding for some of this? Are you looking to like launch a premium version at some point and make it like a paid option? Like what would success look like for this?
So success for me are two things: a reasonable amount of users, not millions, okay? Just a reasonable amount. And for me to make a living out of it, a salary. No, we're not talking about Silicon Valley investment. We're talking about a salary for one person, for one family. So how to make that happen? How to make a couple of $1,000 USD per month coming into your bank account so that you can keep working on this and you don't need to do side jobs, gigs here and there that take your energy. So I'm going full on with open source. Right now the plugin is open source. I'm not thinking of selling anything yet. So I want to see if the open source strategy can work. I'm looking for sponsors. So I'm trying to reach out. I'm actually in the process of doing this. I'm reaching out to a few companies. My message is, if my plugin becomes successful, then people will appreciate that you are the one who is funding me. I don't think I will have one funder. I think that I will need 2 or 3 or 4, so instead of having one big one, I get 4 small ones. And if I manage to do that, I'm done. I'm settled. If I don't manage to do that, I will have to go the pro version and then split my plugin into a basic version. And if you want more power, pay for the upgrade. I'm trying to avoid it, but let's see. If I have no option, I will have to go down that path.
Yeah, understood. Cool. I think as you've been talking, I've been trying to think of opportunities for this because my area is a little bit more like growth marketing stuff. And I think you're right about the like paid ads. That sounds like not really the right opportunity because of the open source nature of it. I like the writing of content. I think people searching organically, they find your articles or find your content. That's a good way for people to find you, potentially try out a free tool, right? It's also, if they land on your blog post, it's a free thing to do because it's open source. It's not like you're trying to get them to swipe a credit card. So that next step is actually, I think the conversion's probably going to be a lot better than if it was like something someone would have to like pay for. So I bet getting users that way is a good option through that content marketing. Does take time, as I'm sure is that writing content and getting it to rank well and learning on-page, off-page SEO, that kind of stuff, writing high-quality content. It takes a long time to have effect, months and years to really get going. But the thing you mentioned about Reddit was super interesting because I think based on your goals of having a salary that supports a single family, you're not talking about $1 billion company that's your goal, right? You're talking about, I want to like live a good life and run a cool company and continue to enjoy what I'm doing and support myself and my family. And this idea that I've talked about people on the podcast before about having 1,000 true fans is, I think, somewhat applicable to this, which is like, you don't need 1 million fans. You need, maybe thousands of fans or maybe tens of thousands for an open source plugin of dedicated people to what you do. So Reddit community sounded interesting to me, or some kind of community where you can continue talking about your product, because you mentioned here like people who have tried your product, strangers, maybe people you know even, have been like, this is awesome. Like that's really good news. Like if your users are like, whoa, this is awesome, that's like probably the most positive signal you can get, is that I'm on to something. And to build a community to help market your stuff, I think is probably a good move. So continuing some of that Reddit, being involved in the Reddit area, because it's really just like a forum. It's kind of Reddit's a big thing now, the GameStop and all this, stuff is blown up in terms of Reddit, but it's a, glorified forum where people hang out. Maybe building out your own community. I don't know if you thought about doing like, it depends on your, how you feel about Facebook, but a Facebook group or a Slack community, or using something like Circle or Tribe to build like your own community out. Sounds like might be an interesting way to go for open source software. It's really about community. So I don't know what your thoughts are about that kind of stuff.
I actually am planning to do a newsletter soon. Actually, starting this weekend, I want to have a newsletter to talk about this process. Actually, everything that I'm talking to you right now, the behind the scenes, what is going on to have a plugin, because people are not aware of all of these things. They download the plugin, they use it. Yeah. They don't even know that there's a human being behind who is coding it and who needs to right. make a salary to survive and to keep doing this, right? So one of the things that I want to do is to have a newsletter that I send once a month with the whole process. And I really enjoy the process. This is a challenge. Yeah. It's tough. And I wish I could just be already, succeeding, making a lot of money, and, it's not the case. Yeah. But if I do make it, whenever I make it, I will say I made it. I will deserve it. So yeah, my first thing is to have this kind of connection, that it's cool to talk about these things, and in a way that we are all in this together. Everyone is going through the same experience. The WordPress community is very big, and the successful players are actually very few. The big names, the ones that made it, Automatic or Yoast, right? Those are very few. Everyone else is like me. We are really striving to make it to the end of the month, with our plugin somehow, So in that sense, I think that I can actually connect to the WordPress community, but I only know how to approach them. I don't have a channel to approach these people, the ones who are all of us doing the same work. I use Reddit, as I was telling you, because it's convenient, but that's not the WordPress community, though. And I don't think there is something like the Reddit community for WordPress. I haven't found it, at least.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about, or at least how I think about it, is kind of the building in public model, which I think is really powerful among the developer community. I would say if you're doing content marketing, that's a great conversion point of like someone comes to read, I'm on your blog right now, and the first article there is just like GraphQL API versus WP GraphQL, talking about some of the differences there. I bet people are Googling that kind of stuff. So when people Google that, they may find your article. Hey, a little corner scroll box that says like, hey, like I'm Leonardo, I built this. I also build it in public. I send a newsletter out once a week that literally details everything I did that week in the like background of building this. I'd love to have you along for the journey. Hey, I would love to hear about that. I just had Brian Castle on the podcast a few weeks ago, and he like tweets all the time, like GIFs and like videos and like screenshots of the stuff he's literally working on. And he doesn't care if it's like really good or really bad or like somewhere in between. Most of the stuff he does is great. But the thing is, like, people love him for that. They're like, wow, because he gets great feedback on Twitter, and like you could do it on Twitter, but also an email is just as good. Austin Ginder in the WordPress community, he runs a hosting company, anchor.host, and I'm part of his newsletter. He's no friend of mine in the WordPress space, but I get his newsletter. He emails out like once a week, sometimes twice a week, about the stuff he's working on. I'm always super interested because it's the same. That's what he's doing. It's pretty much building in public based on his emails and his newsletter. So that may like go to anchor.host and sign up for that newsletter, because that's a really good example, I think, of like why I'm not just invested in his company, but like in him. Like, I'm like, Austin's awesome. Like, look at all this stuff he's doing. I would not have known about this if he was not sending this newsletter out. I would just kind of see the front end of Anchor.host and be like, okay, like another hosting company. But that newsletter like really gets me invested. So I think that's a really interesting idea of like kind of the it's almost like a build in public in the newsletter, which I think is a like, it adds a good human element of like, this is not just a tool, it's like a tool built by human beings, and would you like support this human being? No.
Yeah, I follow several newsletters. I read you have the Delicious Brains newsletter, which is quite awesome. It's pretty technical, but it's cool because you get to learn so much. They have a problem, they have a plugin, they solve the problem, and then they tell you how. So instead of saying this is my knowledge, I don't want my competitors to know about this. No, on the opposite, share it with everyone, and I really enjoy this. So I actually want to do exactly the same thing with my blog post and then with the newsletter to share my challenges, the plugin, technical, and the business, like business, not business as in making money, business as how to survive, as a connection, But yeah, that's the idea. That's the idea.
Yeah, cool. I think again, I saw that blog post, and there are a few different solutions for in this area, right? So you kind of have a blog post about GraphQL API versus WP GraphQL. We're somewhat in the same boat at WP Buffs, where we have there's other people who do what we do in the space, and we're always trying to be unique and make sure we have kind of a competitive advantage over others. But I was wondering how it's been for you in terms of having other people who do this work too. Has it been a challenge to kind of make your tool unique? Is that something you're following? Are you like seeing what other folks are doing and kind of letting that lead you to some new features and stuff you want to do? Or are you kind of just like doing things on your own and getting more feedback from users? What's your strategy around like other people in the space with similar solutions or with solutions that are trying to solve what you're trying to solve too?
Right. Okay. So there are two plugins for GraphQL in WordPress. Mine, which is called GraphQL API, and WP GraphQL. WP GraphQL is the GraphQL plugin. So I wouldn't call myself a competition yet, because it's a very small guy against the big guy. It's what it is. Nobody knows about my plugin yet. I just launched it. My website is 1 month old. So only now I'm reaching out and contacting people to say, hey, check this out. I think it's pretty cool. Until now, they didn't even know that there was a second plugin. So then the competition is between these two plugins. I do not check how they do or what they do, because it's a completely different architecture. I didn't start my plugin to compete with them because they did something wrong. No, not at all. As I was mentioning just now, I was mentioning at the beginning, I've been working on WordPress since 2012 for a friend of mine who had an NGO, and I was experimenting. So as I was experimenting, I created this framework based on server-side components. No need to talk about this, it's very technical. But it got so good, it got so awesome, that I went down this path of developing just for the sake of developing it. So around 1.5 years ago, I discovered GraphQL. I am not using GraphQL since the beginning. GraphQL was launched in 2015, and it became popular in 2016 around. So it's been 4+ years of GraphQL. I discovered GraphQL around 2019. And when I saw what they were doing, I thought that I could do the same with my framework. And it was a challenge. It was a technical challenge, me, developer. Of course you can do it. It's like a mathematical problem that I need to try to solve. And I did it. And I did this on my own, completely blinded of what was going on at the same time. So WP GraphQL had started development in 2016, if I'm not wrong. By 2018, they had something which was not stable, but was okay, and people started using it. So fast forward to today, they have had more than 2 years of a plugin that all companies have been using. It was the only GraphQL solution for WordPress. It was not like necessarily grandiose, but it worked. I mean, it's GraphQL. That's what you needed. So now I come out of nowhere and I bring my other plugin. If you ask me about technical stuff, I can tell you my plugin is superior. And I mean it. And I say it with pride because I've been working on this for many years. And I actually, if you read the blog post on my website that says WP GraphQL versus GraphQL API, the blog post is 30 minutes long. I try to go all over it because I want to demonstrate. I want to say, I think my stuff is better. Why? I want to explain why. I'm not trying to sell you something. As I said, I'm not good with marketing, but I can explain what I have built and why I built it like that and how it works. And in this process, I was all on my own, absolutely on my own, not going out, not seeing the light of the day. One day you come out from a deep sleep and you open the windows and it's a beautiful day. I was in a dark room working on my stuff for like 2 years without looking outside to see what was going on.
Mm-hmm. I think what you say about marketing is interesting because you kind of say you feel like you're not the best marketer, but as a marketer myself, I think the best marketing is authentic and is honestly it's just education and giving people the data and knowledge they need to make an informed decision and to make the best product to solve the best pain points for people. So I'd say the marketing you're doing is great. There may be some things you'll continue to learn along the way. Okay, how do I make sure that article that's so well written and so comprehensive, how do I make sure that ranks well in search engines? That may be like a tactical marketing thing you'll have to continue to learn in terms of SEO stuff. But don't change your marketing approach. I think you have to market from who you are, and that's the best. That's the to be an ethical marketer and to have a good relationship with the truth and with knowledge and data. That's so important. You see all sorts of marketers doing all sorts of crazy quote unquote marketing things. It's really just to generate leads and to get more clients, but it's missing. That's the goal. It's not to help. It's not to have the best product. And so I'd say keep doing what you're doing. So cool. I think that's a great point to start wrapping up today. Tell folks where they can find you online, all this stuff online, go read this blog post, all that stuff.
All right. So my website is GraphQL-API.com. My Twitter is @Losoviz, like my surname. And you can contact me through these channels on GraphQLAPI.com. There is a contact us form, so I will get it, and then Twitter. And I'm always available. I get very excited with people who want to try out the plugin and then they give me feedback. So if you have any feedback, both good or bad, maybe you're like, look, I think you can do something better. Please let me know. I want to know all about it. The other day, one person installed my plugin and it did not work on his environment. He had mod security installed and it failed for him. So he sent me an email saying, hey, I cannot install your plugin. And he gave me the log of the error. I fixed it in 15 minutes. And it made my day because actually this was just before I published this blog post on the comparison between GraphQL API and WP GraphQL. And I've had many more downloads since then. So I was thinking, I don't want people to download my plugin and then they cannot install it. It's buggy. So yeah, whenever somebody contacts me, I get so excited, even if it is to ask me stuff or to ask me to work for them to fix the problem, which is my problem. So yeah, please talk to me, guys.
Yeah, and I will add on to that. Leonardo's said in this podcast he is potentially looking for some sponsors for his project. So if you have any interest in that, or maybe you represent a bigger company that wants to invest and give back in the GraphQL space, reach out to Leonardo or reach out to me and I'll make a connection with Leonardo and we'll make sure you get to talk. So yeah, Leonardo, thank you again. Last thing I always ask the guests on the show to do is for you to ask our listeners now for a little iTunes review for us. So if you wouldn't mind asking listeners for a quick iTunes review, I'd appreciate it.
I asked for an iTunes review. You mean to ask them to review? Yeah, everyone, please come for this show. You have to come and leave a wonderful review. I will vouch for you and for Joe. I mean, he's doing such a wonderful job, so he deserves it. I mean, this is the least that we can do for him. Just go to the iTunes. It's 5 stars, right? Is that how it works? That's the highest, right? So give him the 5 stars. I mean, he deserves it. Everyone, please do it for me. Do it for Joe.
Awesome. Appreciate it, man. Yes, if people leave an iTunes review, you can just leave 5 stars or you can leave a comment. Tell us how much you like this episode. I can shoot it to Leonardo and say, thanks for helping us get a review. It helps us to know what future topics to go on. Okay, we're going to obviously do more GraphQL content. We got like 4 or 5-star reviews from this episode, so we want to do more content around it. That helps us with content creation, helping us do episodes on topics that you, our listeners, love. WPMRR.com/iTunes redirects you right there if you are on a Mac device or Apple device. If you're a new listener to the show, go ahead and listen to some old episodes. You can go ahead and binge old WPMRR podcast episodes instead of Netflix or Hulu or any of that, HBO Max, whatever. Check out and binge some old podcast episodes, something that'll help you grow your business or your WordPress company. If you have questions for us at the show, we like to do Q&A episodes every once in a while. Shoot those into us at yo@wpmrr.com, or you can hit me up on Twitter at Joseph H. Howard. And yeah, would love to answer some questions live here on the show. That is it this week for the podcast. We'll be in your podcast players again next Tuesday. Leonardo, thanks again for being on, man. It's been real.
Thanks so much to you, Joe. I have really appreciated your talk today, and your podcast. It's absolutely wonderful. Thanks so much.
Appreciate it, man. Right back at you. All right. See you, everyone. Later.